"You do not belong in this line. Step aside before I call security." The gate agent pointed a thick finger toward the back of the airport terminal. His name was Thomas. He stood 6 feet tall in a crisp blue airline uniform. He crossed his arms and looked down at Maya. Maya held a sleeping 3-year-old girl against her chest. She held a first-class boarding pass in her right hand. The print was bold and black, Seat 1A. But Thomas did not look at the ticket. He looked at her worn gray sweatpants. He looked at her tired eyes. He looked at the color of her skin. "People like you do not fly up front," Thomas sneered. The other passengers stared. Businessmen in expensive suits whispered. A woman wearing a silk scarf chuckled. Nobody stepped forward to help. Not one person. They watched a single black mother get humiliated at gate 42. But Thomas made a terrible mistake, a mistake that would cost him his job, his pension and his entire life savings before the sun went down, because the woman he just threatened to arrest did not just buy a seat on this airplane. She owned the entire airline. Some people think power always wears a suit and tie. They think wealth always shouts. They are wrong. Real power is quiet. It watches. It waits for you to show exactly who you are when you think nobody important is looking. We live in a world where people with a tiny bit of authority use it to crush anyone who looks vulnerable. Gate agents, store managers, desk clerks. They bully the tired, they bully the weak, they bully people who look different. They get away with it every single day because the system protects them. But not today. Today, the bully picked the absolute worst possible target on Earth. My name is Aaron. And before I tell you what happened on that plane, please subscribe to my channel and give this video a hype at the end if you like it. Let me take you to the boarding lane of Flight 804 Maya. Vance did not always have money. She grew up in a small apartment. Her mother worked 3 jobs just to pay for rent and cheap food. Maya wore clothes from thrift stores. She knew exactly what it felt like to be ignored. She knew what it felt like to be treated like dirt by people who had more money. But Maya was smart. She was tough. She loved airplanes. When she was 20 years old, she got a job cleaning passenger airplanes late at night. She swept the dirty floors. She wiped the greasy windows. She picked up the trash left behind by rich people in first class. She learned everything about how an airline worked, from the inside out. She saved every single penny she made years later. She used her savings to buy one old cargo plane. It was broken. It was covered in rust. She fixed the engine with her own hands. She started flying boxes across the country. She worked 20 hours a day. She built her own company. She called. Vance Aviation. 1 plane turned into 10 planes. 10 planes turned into 100 planes. Now, 15 years later, she owned the biggest aviation holding company in the world. She had billions of dollars. She had giant mansions. She had private jets. But she never forgot where she came from. She never forgot the terrible smell of the cleaning chemicals. She never forgot the rude passengers. She kept her heart grounded. Her daughter, Chloe, was 3 years old. Maya wanted Chloe to grow up kind. She wanted Chloe to know that money does not make you better than anyone else. Last week, Maya bought a new company. It was called Apex Air. Apex Air was failing fast. It was losing millions of dollars every single month. The board of directors held a big meeting. They sat in a shiny glass room. They wore expensive suits. They drank fancy bottled water. They told Maya that fuel prices were too high. They blamed the economy. They blamed the government. Maya did not believe them at all. She read the customer reviews online. The reviews were terrible. People hated flying on Apex Air. They said the planes were dirty. They said the flights were always late. But mostly, they said the employees were mean. Maya knew the real problem. The rot was at the ground level. A company is only as good as the people who represent it. Maya decided she needed to see the truth for herself. She refused to read another boring paper report. She refused to send a secret shopper. She was going to do it herself. She planned a secret mission. She chose a major airport in Chicago. She chose the busiest travel day of the entire week. She needed a good disguise if she wore her normal clothes. People would know she was rich. She needed to look poor. She needed to look very vulnerable. She went into her giant closet. She walked past the beautiful silk dresses. She walked past the heavy diamond necklaces. She walked past the designer shoes. She found a cardboard box in the back of the closet. It held her old clothes from college. She pulled out a pair of grey sweatpants. They were faded. They had a small hole near the knee. She put them on. She found an old black hoodie. The zipper was broken. She put it on. She took off her expensive watch. She took off her wedding ring. She tied her hair into a messy bun. She looked in the mirror. She did not look like a billionaire anymore. She looked like a tired, single mother who was struggling to survive. That was exactly what she wanted. She woke up little Chloe. She dressed Chloe in simple clothes. Chloe was sleepy. She rubbed her eyes and rested her head on Maya's shoulder. Maya did not call her private driver. She did not take a black limousine. She called a regular yellow taxi. She rode in the back seat. The seat was sticky. The air smelled like old coffee. Maya smiled. This was real life. She arrived at the airport. It was loud. It was crowded. People were rushing everywhere. Maya carried Chloe. She also carried a cheap canvas bag. She walked to the ticket counter. She had already bought her ticket online. She bought the most expensive ticket possible. She bought seat 1A. In first class, it cost her $4,000. She wanted to test a specific theory. She wanted to see how the airline staff would treat a person who looked poor but paid for the best seat. She walked through security. She stood in long lines. Her back ached. Chloe felt heavy. Nobody offered to help her. That was okay. Maya was used to carrying heavy loads. She finally reached the gate. It was gate 42. Thomas Jenkins stood behind the tall wooden desk at gate 42. He was 55 years old. He wore a crisp blue uniform. His shoes were shiny. His name tag was perfectly straight. Thomas had worked for Apex Air for 22 years. He hated every single minute of it. Thomas was an angry man. He thought he was smarter than everyone. Else he thought he deserved to be a manager. But the company passed him over for promotion 3 times. They told him he lacked people skills. They told him he was too harsh. This made Thomas even more angry. He decided to punish the world. Since he could not control the company, he decided to control the passengers. Gate 42 was his kingdom. He ruled it with an iron fist. He loved telling people no. He loved finding small rules to break their spirits. If a passenger's bag was 1 inch too big, Thomas made them pay $50. If a family was running late and reached the gate 1 minute after it closed, Thomas smiled and refused to open the door. He loved power. He loved seeing the panic in their eyes. It made him feel important. It made him feel like a king. Today was a good day for Thomas. Flight 804 was delayed by 2 hours. There was a bad storm on the East Coast. The terminal was packed with angry people. There were no empty seats. Children were crying. Businessmen were tapping their watches. Thomas stood behind his desk and watched them suffer. He felt completely in control. 2 younger gate agents worked next to him. Their names were Sarah and David. They were new. They were terrified of Thomas. Thomas yelled at them if they made a mistake. Thomas told them to ignore the complaining passengers. He told them that passengers were like cattle. You had to herd them and show them who was boss. Sarah and David just nodded. They did not want to lose their jobs. They let Thomas do whatever he wanted. The air at the gate was thick with tension. Everyone was tired. Everyone wanted to go home then. The computer beeped. The plane was finally ready. Thomas picked up the microphone. He cleared his throat. He spoke in a loud, slow voice. He announced that Flight 804 was ready for boarding. He said they would begin with first class and diamond, elite members only. He told everyone else to stay seated and stay out of the way. The crowd shifted. The wealthy passengers stood up. They wore tailored suits. They carried expensive leather briefcases. They looked relieved. They wanted to get away from the crowded gate. They formed a neat line on the red carpet. Maya heard the announcement. She stood up slowly. Her legs were stiff. Chloe was fast asleep on her chest, wrapped in a thin pink blanket. Maya picked up her cheap canvas bag. She walked toward the red carpet. She walked slowly. The wealthy passengers saw her coming. They stared at her. A man with gray hair and a blue suit frowned. He looked at Maya's faded sweatpants. He looked at her messy hair. He stepped slightly to the side, as if he did not want her to touch him. A woman wearing a silk scarf whispered something to her husband. She let out a small, cruel laugh. They all thought the same thing. They thought this poor woman was confused. They thought she did not know the fray. Rules? They expected someone to stop her. Thomas was watching. He saw Maya walking toward his line. His eyes narrowed. He felt a surge of anger. He hated when people broke his rules. He saw her clothes. He saw her skin color. He saw the sleeping baby. He made a snap judgment in his mind. He decided she was a nobody. He decided she was trying to sneak onto the plane early. He was not going to let that happen. Not in his kingdom. Thomas stepped out from behind the tall wooden desk. He walked right into the middle of the red carpet. He stood with his feet wide apart. He crossed his massive arms across his chest. He looked like a guard blocking a castle door. He did not smile. He did not say hello. He physically blocked Maya's path. Maya was still 10 feet away from the ticket scanner. She stopped walking. She looked up at Thomas. Thomas looked down his nose at her. He spoke in a loud voice. He wanted everyone to hear him. He wanted to embarrass her. This is where the trap snapped shut. The words he said next would end his career forever. You do not belong in this line. Step aside before I call security. Thomas pointed a thick finger toward the back of the airport terminal. Maya did not flinch. She did not look away. She held her baby tight. She reached into her pocket with her free hand. She pulled out a thick paper ticket. The ink was black and bold. It clearly said, Seat 1A, First Class. She held the ticket out toward Thomas. She spoke in a very calm, quiet voice. She said, I believe I am in the right place. I am boarding with first class. Thomas did not even look at the piece of paper. He kept his eyes locked on Maya's face. He let out a nasty, mocking sneer. People like you do not fly up front, he said. The crowd behind Maya went completely silent. Every single person heard what he said. Maya waited. She waited for someone to speak up. She waited for the man in the blue suit to say something. She waited for the woman with the silk scarf to tell Thomas he was being rude. But nobody moved. Nobody said a word. They were complicit in their silence. They let it happen. Maya felt a cold knot form in her stomach. The problem was much worse than she thought. The disease of cruelty had infected the entire airline. Maya stayed perfectly calm. She did not raise her voice. She did not look angry. She simply pushed the ticket closer to Thomas. Please scan the barcode, she said gently. The system will tell you where I sit. Thomas was furious. He hated that she was not scared of him. He hated that she was standing her ground. He grabbed the ticket out of her hand. He marched back to his computer keyboard. He typed the letters of her last name very hard. The keys clacked loudly. The screen loaded. Thomas stared at the monitor. His eyes widened slightly. The system showed that Maya Vance was the legal, paying passenger for seat 1A. The system was never wrong. She had paid $4,000 for the seat. Thomas swallowed hard. For a split second, he knew he had made a mistake, but his pride was too big. His ego was out of control. He could not admit he was wrong in front of all these rich people. He refused to let a woman in sweatpants beat him. He decided to do something evil. He decided to steal her seat. Thomas clicked the mouse. He highlighted Maya's name. He hit the delete. He manually cancelled her first-class ticket. A warning box popped up on the screen. It asked if he was sure. Thomas clicked yes. Then he looked at the standby list. He found the name of a businessman waiting for a seat. He moved that man into Seat 1A. He completely erased Maya from the flight. It took him less than 10 seconds. Thomas turned around. He walked back to the counter. He had a smug, nasty smile on his face. He threw Maya's ticket into the trash can. "Your ticket is invalid," Thomas lied. His voice was full of fake sympathy. "It looks like a system glitch, or maybe you used stolen credit card miles. Either way, you have no seat on this airplane. You need to leave the gate area immediately." Maya looked at the trash can. She looked at Thomas. She knew exactly what he had just done. She knew the computer system better than the people who built it. "I paid for that seat," Maya said quietly. "I would like to speak to your supervisor right now." Thomas threw his head back and laughed. It was a cruel, loud laugh. "I am the supervisor," he said. "I run this gate, and I am telling you to leave. If you do not turn around and walk away right now, I am going to call the airport police. I will have you arrested for trespassing. I will have you arrested for causing a disturbance. They will take you away in handcuffs, and child services will take your baby." That was the line Thomas had. Crossed the final line. He threatened her child. Maya's eyes turned as cold as ice. She stopped acting like a scared mother. She stood up completely straight. The air around her seemed to change. "Call them," Maya said. Her voice was pure steel. "Call the police. Let us see exactly what happens." Thomas was shocked. He thought she would run away crying. Instead, she dared him to do it. His face turned bright red. He grabbed the heavy black radio from his belt. He pressed the button. He yelled into the microphone. He called for emergency backup at gate 42. He said there was an aggressive passenger refusing to follow orders. Maya did not move an inch. She stood in the middle of the red carpet. She looked at Sarah and David, the other two agents. They looked down at their shoes. They were cowards. They watched a man bully a mother and they did nothing. Maya carved their faces into her memory. She waited for the trap to close. 2 minutes later, heavy footsteps echoed. On the tile floor, two large airport police officers pushed through the crowd of passengers. They wore thick black boots. They had heavy belts loaded with tools and radios. Their faces were serious. They walked straight up to Thomas. Thomas immediately played the victim. He pointed a shaking finger at Maya. He changed his voice to sound stressed and scared. "Officers, thank goodness you are here," Thomas lied. "This woman is causing a massive scene. She has a fake ticket. I asked her nicely to leave, but she refused. She is acting erratic. She is delaying the flight. She needs to be removed from the terminal." Right now, the officers turned to look at Maya. They saw a woman in cheap sweatpants holding a sleeping baby. They did not see a threat. But they had to follow protocol. The older officer stepped forward. He put his hand on his radio. He spoke in a deep, firm voice. "Ma'am, you are causing a disturbance. We need you to step out of the line. We need to see your government identification. Right now, hand over your driver's license." The crowd watched. The rich passengers leaned forward to see the poor woman get arrested. Thomas stood behind the desk with a giant smile on his face. He had won. He had crushed her. Maya did not argue. She did not cry. She used one arm to hold her baby. She used her free hand to reach into the deep pocket of her gray sweatpants. She pulled her hand out. She did not hold a driver's license. She did not hold a plastic ID card. She held a solid piece of metal. It was a thick, black titanium card. It caught the light. It had no name printed on it. It had no picture. It only had a small, pure gold seal pressed into the center. It was the master access card for the Global Holding Corporation. It was a card that only 3 people in the entire world possessed. It meant the person holding it literally owned the ground the airport was built on. Maya handed the heavy metal card to the older police officer. The officer took it. He felt how heavy it was. He looked. At the gold seal he frowned. He was confused. "Ma'am, what is this?" I asked for an ID. Maya ignored the officer. She reached back into her pocket. She pulled out a sleek black smartphone. It was not a normal phone. It was an encrypted satellite phone used by billionaires and heads of state. She typed a 4-digit code. She dialed a private number. She held the phone to her ear. The gate area was dead silent. Everyone was watching. Thomas stopped smiling. Something felt wrong. The woman was not acting right. She was too calm. Maya spoke. Into the phone. Her voice echoed in the quiet terminal. "Marcus, I am at gate 42. Get down here right now." She hung up the phone. She put it back in her pocket. She looked at the police officers. "Keep holding that card," she said. "The man who is about to come down that hallway is going to explain exactly what it means." 3 long minutes passed. Nobody moved. The tension was suffocating. Then the sound of sprinting footsteps echoed from the VIP escalator. A man in a $5,000 charcoal suit was running at full speed. His name was Marcus Sterling. He was the global vice president of operations for the entire Apex Air Corporation. He was the boss of everyone in the building. Marcus was sweating. His silk tie was flying over his shoulder. He looked absolutely terrified. He crashed through the crowd of wealthy passengers. He shoved the man in the blue suit out of the way. He reached the red carpet. He stopped abruptly. Panting for air, he looked at Thomas. He looked at the police officers. Then he looked at the woman in the faded grey sweatpants. Marcus Sterling, a man who fired executives for fun, dropped his briefcase on the floor. He clasped his hands together. In front of him, he bowed his head slightly. His voice shook as he spoke. "Madam CEO," Marcus gasped. "I am so incredibly sorry. I had no idea you were flying a commercial today." The entire gate area froze. It was as if someone hit a pause button on the world. The man in the blue suit dropped his jaw. The woman with the silk scarf gasped and covered her mouth. The 2 police officers stared at the black titanium card in their hands, their eyes wide with sudden terror. And Thomas stopped breathing. All the blood drained from his face in 1 second. His skin turned the color of chalk. His knees shook. He grabbed the edge of his wooden desk just to keep from falling. Over his brain tried to understand the words Madame CEO. This woman in the dirty sweatpants was Maya Vance. She was the billionaire who had just bought the airline for $5 billion cash. She was the ultimate boss. She was the owner of everything. He saw Maya looked at Marcus. "Marcus, explain to these officers who I am." Marcus turned to the police. He looked at the metal card they were holding. "That card gives her supreme executive clearance over this entire facility," Marcus said quickly. "That is Maya Vance. She owns Apex Air. She owns the company that pays your airport security contracts. She is the owner." The police officers stepped backward. The older officer wiped sweat from his forehead. He carefully handed the black card back to Maya. He treated it like it was a live bomb. He apologized repeatedly. Maya put the card back in her pocket. She turned her body slowly. She locked her eyes on Thomas Jenkins. Thomas looked like a ghost. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. He tried to force a smile, but his lips just trembled. "Ma'am?" Thomas finally squeaked. "Madam, I didn't know the system. The clothes." Maya cut him off. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the air like a razor blade. "You did not know I was the owner?" Maya said, But you knew I was a mother. You knew I had a sleeping child. You knew I was a human being. And you decided that I was trash. You decided you had the right to humiliate me. You decided you had the right to steal my seat just because you did not like the way I looked. Thomas started to cry. Real tears formed in his eyes. He begged, "Please, I have been here 22 years. Please, my pension, I have a family." Maya did not care. He showed no mercy to her, and she would show no mercy to him. "You are terminated," Maya said clearly. Every word was heavy. "You are not just fired. You are terminated with extreme cause. We have you on security cameras. We have 100 witnesses. You violated federal transport laws by cancelling a valid ticket out of malice. You threatened to call child services on a paying passenger because you are fired with cause. Your pension is immediately frozen. Your travel benefits are permanently revoked. You have zero severance pay. You have nothing." Thomas let out a loud sob. He covered his face with his hands. Maya looked at Marcus Sterling. "Marcus, I want his security badge deactivated right now." Marcus nodded frantically and typed on his tablet. Maya looked at the police officers. "Officers, this man no longer works for my airline. He is now trespassing behind my ticket counter. Please escort him out of the airport." The officers did not hesitate. They walked behind the desk. They grabbed Thomas by his arms. They pulled him away from his computer. They unclipped his security badge from his collar. Thomas was crying loudly. He dragged his feet. It was the ultimate walk of shame. Maya watched him go. Then she turned her head. She looked at Sarah and David, the two young agents who had hidden behind the desk. They were shaking. "You two," Maya said softly. "You saw him abuse a passenger. You said nothing. You did nothing. You are both suspended. Without pay for 30 days pending a full HR investigation. Step away from the desk." Sarah started crying. They both walked away. Maya looked at the crowd. She pointed to a young woman wearing an Apex Air uniform, pushing a wheelchair near the back of the Terminal U. Maya called out, "Come here." The young woman ran up to the desk. Maya asked for her name. The girl said her name was Maria. "Maria," Maya said, "you are now the lead gate agent for Flight 804 board this plane." The boarding process began. It was the quietest boarding in the history of aviation. Maria called for first class. Maya Vance was the first person to walk down the jet bridge. She carried her canvas bag. She held sleeping little Chloe against her chest. She stepped onto the plane. She found seat 1A. It was a massive, soft leather seat. She sat down. She pulled the blanket up over her daughter. A minute later, the wealthy passengers started walking onto the plane. They had to walk right past seat 1A to get to their places. They were terrified. The man in the blue suit looked down at the floor as he walked past. The woman with the silk scarf kept her eyes glued to the ceiling. They were so ashamed of how they had acted. They realized they were inches away from ruining their own lives by siding with a bully. They sat in their seats in total silence. Maya did not gloat. She did not smile at them. She just held her baby. The doors closed. The plane pushed back from the gate. The engines roared to life. The giant metal bird lifted into the sky. Maya looked out the window at the clouds. She felt a deep sense of peace. She knew there was still a lot of work to do. Apex Air was broken, but she had just fired the first shot in a massive war to fix it. The next morning, she would fire the executives who let this happen. She would change the training programs. She would make sure that no mother in faded sweatpants ever felt small at one of her gates ever again. But for now, she just closed her eyes and rested. The story of what happened at Gate 42 spread like wildfire across the entire company. Employees called it the Day of the Sweatpants. It became a legend. Nobody ever looked at a passenger the same way again, because you never know who you are talking to. You never know who holds the true power. Before we end this video, I promised you a massive reward. I promised to tell you the exact 5-word sentence Maya whispered to Thomas right before the police officers put their hands on him and marched him out of the terminal. It is a lesson in ultimate control. When Thomas was begging for his job, crying about his 22 years of service, he leaned over the desk and whispered, "Why are you doing this to me?" Maya leaned in very close. She looked directly into his terrified eyes. She did not scream. She whispered 5 simple words that destroyed his entire reality. She said, "You just fired your boss